We're really happy to have Ginger co-reading here tonight, especially given the fortitude she must show, given what's happening in Texas, where she's coming to us from. Thank you for doing this under such circumstances. I hope somehow it's a semi-temporary relief to be with us. This is the second Holloway event in a week. After this, we'll pause until March 18th when Francine Harris will be here. Then on April 8th, we are having an event co-sponsored with El Grupo in which Roberto Tejada and Ana Dina Morales will read. And then on April 14th, our last event will take place, which is the reading by our current Holloway poet in residence, Jen Hoffer. Tonight, Will Davidson is reading and will be introduced by Jared Robinson, and then Jesse Nathan will introduce Ginger Ko. So take it away, Jared. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming, everyone, I guess. What kind of attention is a sentence? Desire says, I should not like to enter this risky order of discourse. I should not like to be involved in its peremptoriness and decisiveness. I should like it to be all around me like a calm, deep transparence, infinitely open, where others would fit in with my expectations and from which truths would emerge one by one. I should only have to let myself be carried within it and by it, like a happy wreck. The institution replies, for Desserteau, the tactical grows within the strategic like a bad tooth, changing its resting expression for a time, perhaps permanently. I propose that Will's poems understand the seeing of artworks or anything in this way, that if you see something and then begin to say something, you have done something suspicious, rotten, tactical. Thus, Will's speaker is not to be trusted, not because it is trying to lie to you, but because it wouldn't bear the distinction drawn by any accusations of fibbery for its part in the first place. To encounter Will's speaker is to encounter the question of the efficacy and ethics of looking at all, of the fact that any sensation begun must continue, however impaired or elaborated, endlessly. And further, that this continuation, a passing game between experience and memory, is a tempting of desire, a tantalizing, like the logic hiding behind casual syntax that pulls the body forward toward meaning. Meaning like a horizon that is merely a pulling open of space for more syntax, that hands down the sentence of uncrossable distance, that fades and brightens, blurs and binds, but does this only. His skepticism for the given is not negative, does not crush or reduce it, even as it seems to surround or dismiss it into concepts, propositions, reckless beginnings. It is better described as a frustration with the coextensive reduction and overgeneralization of a phrase like a piece of art. Will's poems clamor to get closer to all that lives within this ambit of possible relations enclosed by the horizon, a world that is just as often ours as that of the redpoll or the hawthorn or the ash. To stay the isolation and categorization of mere pieces, they index, contextualize, and present all at once. They set things as landscapes into yet larger landscapes, working themselves through processes of communication, of representation, of sensation, that undo themselves as the discovery of the limitations of such professions, only to be undone again to anger, despair, or outright boredom at the order that gets secreted in every presentation bound by language, the recurrent binding logic of syntax, and this harsh sentence. Will's poetry is a sentencing. This, his line in thinking, breaks. So then, what sort of sense is Will's sentence? The more accurate question is perhaps, what can be given without reservation? Please join me in welcoming my friend, Will.
Thank you very much, Jared. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, and thanks Jess and Jeffrey for organizing and Ginger for reading. I'm just going to read some poems from a recent project I've been working on. I have seen the squirrels busy themselves since May. I have watched the candles flicker in the horse chestnuts on June evenings. I have felt in my pocket and my stomach the price of rock scones steadily rise. I have heard people leave in tears in the morning and by night sneak quietly back to their place. I have attended weddings, cracked jokes, suffered heartbreak, and witnessed murder. I am telling you this so you know. Proceed slowly to sense. The norms have only regressed so far. It is nothing like moving toward a light. There is no personal space, no niche, sensory or temporal that cannot be easily withdrawn. The world becomes chaos and synthesis, salvation. He said, come to me dressed as evensong. Said, I can offer shelter and safe passage, but cannot promise love. The lace is looped in a double knot on the tongue of his new trainers. As he talks, watch its slack figure 8 still. Watch his mouth open and close. Watch a fleck of his spit settle and then seep into the tan suede toe cap, feeling as I feel, melt from the objects you have known, coddle in the space left open, a self held in several abeyance, itching like a dry scab as the rain streaks hideous white through the dust on the exterior wall. The next morning, the same words I roll on my tongue are small and plastic as beads. As the light becoming familiar to itself, shall I compare them to yew berries? Taut-skinned and soft-packed, allow me to add, one by one, to fill my mouth brimming, from glottis to the backs of clasped teeth. I speak, or try to, without piercing their skins. I hold them like little birds and laugh, to feel them jostle and vie for my affection. I hold them like little robins in my mouth and laugh, to feel their plumage tickle the darkness, and just when they are warmed and soft and feel at home, I let them tumble, polished with spit, fledgling into a waiting palm, the patterns they make in letting go. These beads, darker than berry red, scatter to inertia. Her father enjoys thick-cut marmalade and pegging compilations on Pornhub. Whither to eye the lush marzipan of uncertain times. Everything gone Shakespearean, all ornament to the forensics of selfhood. Control H for the map of his desires. Control Shift Delete for the evacuated past. Cut through his clipped speech like cutting off a person's clothes is to know a stranger's search history. The yolk spills yellow velvet over the rim of his porcelain cup. The winter sun oblique through the plate glass. Soldiers all in a line, ready, waiting, willing death on like a tipped gelding pulling for its head. The way people lie in knowing, trying to make a living out of lots of little lies, not very definite yet overwhelming, as if having even happened. Darkly it creates and she defends humanness. Science fiction only seems to predict a choice opaque and hard of supreme value is someone who can fix things. And you think sometimes I'm like that. Do you really? Starting with what living is obviously different. An axiom or a conclusion or a statement or anything so banal. It is less, much less that love moves through. Perhaps simply the freedom to feel all that feels ugly and remain there for a time. For George, my favorite, my next ex-husband, I am hoping your friend better with all my might. I am a writer now, and am learning how you'd like it put, the ways in which one should try to persist. If you had said, singing 6 hours in the fog, that we do not sweat but only wither, would that were enough? presiding over the facts, said there was some distinction between the reign of these half seasons and another coming after with a walk just like mine. When you had said, dear George, closed cities feel heavy and sad. This coast is sweet, and the houses have big, weird faces. Is it that the point, grown funny by supper, is to learn to live together and be intimate again? I will furnish this version of time like so many Edward Thomas poems, or a pamphlet of my millennial salon verse. What new practice now befalls you? What better description of your fears than that? The risk of shaving anything, drunk. Who even gets married anymore, George? Who even has kids? The world is dying after all, and I, holding a little lightness, siphon from alto, add some nutmeg to make that bechamel pop. Recall the Infanta, perhaps, at her whim, the marigolds turn to me and say, a son is hard to eat. The spoon is bent in water. I do love a list of values to espouse, but why so tired, simple bean? She has a lapdog with a crown and a folded sticky face. She calls it Mama, George, Mama. Call me Mama again. It is Madrid hot and the spire, and the sound of mass fulfillment is grinning like a pig in shit. I need not tell you my country is broken. Those flowers I gather are supposed to hang. Self-immolation of the auto-visual. The parakeets in threes infest every city west of Dresden, Madrid, London, Rotterdam. Who knows why the pleasure of this visual datum is momentary? The harsh, cool irks from eucalyptus as from pine. For all the dappled Mediterranean, a man peering hard at a woman sunbathing grinds his pelvis on the bank like a dog. We watch an overpoliced barrio, a Bruegel nestled bleeding in the Prado. What end will this bring? Of bliss and constipation I am well acquainted, stuffed with bread and frothing over El Greco's camp vulvic flare. The Vermouth Grifo is sweeter than life. Though I could die this death 1,000 times, it is Soroya's boys on the beach I love the most. Forgive me not the making and distribution of indecent images. I am a simple sucker for a man who thinks so strongly about light. The dogs along the calle set each other off in the heat like live ammunition. And beyond this, that the city, a nest of eyes, is a panel of eyes that lets in, through the shape of pigeons, the spent skins of foreknowledge that recalls the crusts of the day, remembers the name that must contain something more incisive, a million nesting boundaries. City, 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 at least. City, city, city. Boundaries nested tchotchke dolls where Omar keeps our pictures are stippled with holes, are spoken anew each day in politics that should not scale. The world remains the world, the fiction a fiction, from oikos to nomos and back again, an intimate act shameful like the snuffing out of lamps. I don't find I worry about others eating alone. But when the moon flicks its eye between origin and change, when thought becomes thicker, harder to pass, harder to account for the many tears on which, as in a body, actions complete and repeat, well, new generations don't feel particularly new to me. Get your phones out, have your forms loaded, please. Please something like Keith Jarrett grunting over the sound of his own keys. Remember, my belly button is different to most other people's belly buttons. Remember, anecdotally, of course, you can do whatever you want with me. Remember, I was privy to the king. party to his person, and kept discreet the needling of the spheres, and where was my reward? The older they get, the more they worry about their youth being made into religion. Here, Jarrett, rolling his rapt ostinato on no sleep in Colne, scrawl on the wall, the ear, the lines, a body in deliberate space allows something bulbous to block out something well designed. A swollen thumb held between a squinting eye and a frame. Would it be more effete, ersatz in no good faith, to begin my essay on Guernica thus? The impossibility of controlling the user's experience on entering an extant site of ritual practice. Like that, yes, just like that. An immersive soundscape of tinny desktop speakers depicting in multimedia the traumas of the 21st century. Like that, yes, just like that. The 20 Christs, soused on palm sap, rolled giddy and blinding through the streets of York at dawn. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Will. That was beautiful. Thank you. There's hope in bringing a child into the world, but there's also a madness to it. Madness not only because the world is rife with pressing danger, but also because that which in most cases facilitates reproduction, family, is itself riddled with inherited poisons. Ginger Co's poetry emerges out of and responds to this problem, to the fact that you can't emerge into this world without baggage. No such thing as a clean slate. Co's distrust includes much of what we inherit. Her poems never name and only indirectly allude to the poetry of any particular tradition, but the work directly establishes itself as a feminist poetry when it echoes the enigmatic clarity of H.D. and Gertrude Stein, the moral fury of Sylvia Plath and Kim Hai-soon, and the meditative political sophistication of Jamaica Kincaid, Brenda Hillman, and Mi Young Mi Kim. Poem after poem, closely observed, but often drawing on the privacy of opacity, creates what Grace Shui Liu calls, quote, moments of airtight agony. Co's work, marrying a poetics of exhaustion with a poetics of disgust, sounds a plain-spoken and often spare register, tends to leave out most of the story, tends to metaphors that are all vehicle. And if some have wanted to make the stone stony again, Ginger Co wants to give it knife edges. In one interview, Co's description of her teacher, Danielle Pafunda, applies to her own poetics, offering, as they do, a, quote, razor slash of merry dismissal in the face of broetic condescension. Though her work is nothing like his, she, like Robinson Jeffers, and she is from California, writes from an inspired disdain. The title of one early poem is "Stay Away from My Windows, No One is Welcome." Another early title goes like this: "Get the fuck out, woodland creatures. Get the fuck out, low-hanging fruit." These, gathered in her first book, Mother Lover, were written in the semi-desert prairies of Wyoming, where she was working on an MFA and studying with Harvey Hicks. In one poem, a voice dares a companion to, quote, deny that I'm a prairie lighthouse. In another, she writes, quote, I hear no angels in the music of a difficult landscape. I hear instead the wind. These days, Co, who has a PhD in English from the University of Georgia, teaches creative writing and women's studies at Sam Houston State University, about an hour's drive north of Houston. And as Jeffrey said, with this weather, we're especially lucky she could join us. Her second collection, published in 2017 and called Inherit, is of many ways a similar vein as Mother Lover, but Co's latest work seems to fold more of the world and the present into her lines, as if she's enlarged what she imagines the word family could mean. And while her taste has moved, it seems, toward a longer form, her bleak, oblique style remains. Here, just to give you a quick sampling, is what it sounds like. Nothing, writes Coe, chose us except ourselves. Besides us, nothing chooses us still. There was always the silly, sterile fantasy of budding off into space, but we never could, needed too much our shores. Our presence has made the pressure unbearable, none of it very dissimilar. But the cruelty of privilege flings a weighted net of exoticism. We watch the certainty of replication and misapply it to our families. Without wondering, a bird will pluck at the down of its young until the scalp comes away, its head stiffened askew in the morning. Or, and I'll leave you with this, there are these 6 lines, recently published. It is often easier, Coe writes, to fight the colonizer with his own language than to face one's lost family with the unintelligible. Please welcome Ginger Coe.
Thank you, Jesse, so much for that wonderful introduction. And thank you again, Jessica and Jeffrey and Will, for being here with me tonight, as well as everyone here. I am going to try something a little different tonight as far as how I do Zoom readings. And so I thank you ahead of time for my experiments in how this is going to go. And the reason why, the main reason why I am playing around with these things is because I, of course, am interested in, opening up poetry spaces and performance spaces with inclusive design and greater accessibility. And I am not quite, and I don't think anyone really is, I'm not quite satisfied with, auto captioning. And so I think I just want to put all my words out there while I read. And so I've been trying to find some programs that will do that in an aesthetically pleasing way and is free, though I don't know that I've found the right combination yet. So many of them are geared towards making Zoom readings very slick and polished multimedia style for corporate presentations. I've seen things that are pitch decks or whatever, and that's all great because of course we gotta get that bag from the venture capitalists, but people other than venture capitalists also need to be presented to. And so I don't know that I've found something that is quite legible to a poetry audience, but if you have any strategies, please get in touch. I'm always interested in how other folks are adding or enhancing this space. I'm just trying to pull up my first screen here. There. Will you all still take me seriously if I look like this? So my partner told me this is I'm going with the Twitch stream aesthetic right now. And so, for the first part of my reading, I'm going to go ahead and read from my latest chapbook, How Glossy the Plastic, some of which Jesse quoted from in his very generous and beautiful introduction. And I think I'll just read through it. It's a chapbook that came out with some very delightful folks at Garden Door Press, Kina and Marty Viola Kane, working out of Cornell or Ithaca. And so this, the chapbook that they put together and made with their own hands and printed off themselves was very beautiful. And I just love the work that they put out so much. How glossy the plastic. When we implanted ourselves, I passed on my codes, what was meant to be my best. This is what we learned. Interval. No matter how glossy the plastic. Code teeth and code teats cannot coexist, so get rid of both altogether. Think of other words not for you to know, thoughts not for you to run through. Keep away, especially with the fantasies of your voice that is repulsive to others, straddling the letters. Turn your pockets inside out. Prove that you have not taken what is not yours. Stop speaking. Stop thinking of ways you will speak in the future. Rather than stupidly marvel at how a slow-growing tree insinuates past a chain-link fence, instead, more usefully, twine the wire around your own pointless vocals. Your people have moved on. They know that if their covers were removed, they would pool out difficultly into a loose stain of fat and lymph. Smooth cruelty can be sacred regularity. The powerful want so much to be our siblings, to acknowledge relatedness to monstrous poor. They see themselves in the finely bred birds that cry out until they die at laying age. We throw blood as punishment. We were taught to bleed bright for show, the dark thick meant for unrecorded offings. Every so often, we need to be told a story as if misted from a light rain. Some of us can broadcast uncaringly, but some would rather remain silent than provide something to ridicule or fear. Two halves slip away from a pair of shears, the revealed flesh reflecting a crowd of insects that clatter brightly to the ground like a handful of beads. We were taught that only one species can take antlers and guns both. You cannot get your supply of meat and keep your supply of milk from the same animal. You must have multiples. Our parents allowed themselves to be annihilated, and it was recorded that they were conquered. Secreted away by difference is that their allowance was a power forever inaccessible to the settlers, a decision to walk into the water rather than serve in the fields. No benefit to forming families when all were politicians. Does it become a responsibility that you could bring another joy by being near? Euthanizing winning racehorses reaches back into the past, neutralizes spore, turns it into a metaphor. But the animals do not just slink and flit from roadside trees, they lead lives with each other away from humans. The persistence of a broken pawed mouse is the same as a torn and listing Mysticetes. They continue until they do not continue. Interval, the second war, assemblages. Beginning to travel towards their anticipation, the stressors and implosions. In the valleys against the seas, the landscape glittered with mine dust, but caution stripped us of both guilt and appreciation. We dream, assert ourselves. From where does the code come? Answer, a small enlightened slice of the Northern Hemisphere. Nothing chose us except ourselves. Besides us, nothing chooses us still. There was always the silly, sterile fantasy of budding off into space, but we never could, needed too much our shores. Our presence has made the pressure unbearable, none of it very dissimilar. But the cruelty of privilege flings a weighted net of exoticism. We watch the certainty of replication and misapply it to our families. Without wondering, A bird will pluck at the down of its young until the scalp comes away, its head stiffened askew in the morning. Inside dominated space, a father bonobo brutalizes his son within an observation unit painted in creamy coats of wash. When it comes to our automatons, at times we make them parade. It tugs apart an outlet and spills you out. Our automatons kept separating and storing accumulations, not knowing not to place litters in airtight containers. Warehouses stacked with ambitious bolts of grass. Thinking, the life that responds, the thinking of vines in the rain, the thinking of bonds in the air, the thinking that is a beetle's hiss. The lovely rocks, wind-shaped sensually, they were accepting and thus forgetting. They write replications, gifts of attractions and avoidances. Then the oligarchy deploys allotments of fame. The stitching together of nations began with mythic exhilaration, but it was really naivete. It was throat-catching ignorance. It was the belief that all were the same and all as same as the best of. The routine assemblies meant to diminish, the sea of sameness meant to destroy. If they were skeptical of traditional histories, then the only thing they could be sure of was that every given body was also returned. Automatons, not daughters or sons, but vessels made for industry. The host pretends to have a life of its own, pretends the colonized vessel is in fact alone. We are our children's parasites. We mate with the colonizer and produce our hosts. No synthetics have the compressed look of jagged, unearthed materials. Money provoked strength, so they grew strong, amassed in the abstract small wet pellets and crowded them together in compartments. They're shamans. They do not understand the image of a small girl in a bright red hooded cape, but they can understand the significance of her churning legs. That her legs are bare, cold in the dark of some woods, we don't know what they make of that. Unlike the bird fallen on the cement, head gyrating, beak gargling, my head is round and refilled and twists on with pleasurable solidity. I have a plump, shiny plate of memory. She becomes like a very small doll, photographed against a white space that prints her the size of a pinky fingernail. A cancer once pinked and pitted my breast the way time pitted the stone of those ancient figurines. We taught them that in even the most minuscule separation of sand, a path is revealed. That in traveling between the spark and the ancient light of the smallest star, we cannot find objectivity. And in this way, they determined that there was one consideration. Why do you speak? To be heard or to heal? Some find it unbearable that animals befriend and willingly provide for us. When an animal king visits with a gift, some grab the stag's offering with one hand and with the other kill him for cooking. The bearer is always a gift also. Interval. Dealing with the concept of light or hunger. In the few seconds it takes to watch a horse with its neck snapped in half, head bouncing along its withers as it careens down a mountainside, in the few seconds it takes to feel a deep regret, in the few seconds it takes to forget the creature altogether when the lights flare their cones from above, pleasure made up of leisure and shame, like slicing tubes widthwise for biscuits. The costumes of capability differences give a soap, and a stringent squeak of lac and other tastes. Another preferred technique, opening up the insides under lamps to scrape away webbing from the night-grown flesh and rind. Not holograms, but the quivering hiddens that had pulsed and chewed in the underground of the internal. Or another, studying how arm-thick spicy radishes get pulled up under spotlights, glowing white from their black burials. And still others, a great pail of milk flecked around the edges with vivid grass clippings, premature young laying deflated atop surgical napkins, paper-thin tissue torn at by water droplets. The father, the parasite, the alien, candy birds, tea curs, sachet mice. How can they all be indistinguishable? How can they each be specialists? Within their bodies, they are working out a revolution. Yet they still meet in the street, find a table at a restaurant, turn their gazes to the televised basketball above the bar. They understand that when they drop flowers onto bodies, the bodies, however still, are pushing up against the flowers. Certain things make them lose confidence in their senses, inconsistent motive, vindictive sabotage. They imbibe mist, turn it into cold, heavy drips in themselves. Capture, make dependent, then destroy with neglect. It is often easier to fight the colonizer with his own language than to face one's lost family with the unintelligible. Must everything become abstracted to a buzzing iceberg? A glitchy stillness to the living while the ideas of power crackle in the upper atmosphere? Is this the final natural conclusion? How can it be painless to carry in one's marrow a script made intolerable? We cannot burn garbage. It no longer means anything. We were mistaken to make waste, taking what we cannot return. Interval, another war against species. After a while, the flashes of despair materialized as flickering lights inside the womb, illuminating a placenta come unstuck, a muffled unborn wailing. Each year, the bleaching spread, the unnatural stacking of dead groundwalkers. Elsewhere, beings kept growing with scorch marks. Something like weather, like the vacuum of a scene, is laughing, I was told. Gases, liquids, and light, laughing. The old mythology of the passive egg and conquering sperm made way for not any gristle to be left behind, instead a whole uniform unit of food. I found I could be one of many pores. Poor pores opened up to stashes of contaminants, to sit like gaping bowls with small stones inside. What is worse to witness, a disappointment or a loyal incomprehension? I never think of physical symbolism. It is because my young do not burn more easily than I do. I find that they have inherited only my unrequited longing to hear a voice gently call, "Wake up, love." We all want it more than anything, the call. The beauty of elegant materials are as vulnerable as a nursling's. Someday cannons will break holes in the air to signal the buds to cleave and mist. And after the monsoons, blossoms will heap beneath the branches like rotting snow. Machines not clumsy could avoid unzipping the barbs, and they learned that lying prone and open to be worked on is at times actually a power. But a horse has habits, preferences, cannot be soulless for ideological/territorial sacrifice. Murder by exposure only works with a sufficient amount of defenselessness, even if at some point the formula is derived. The difference between surrounding air and the distant sky seen by eye. Necks that reach their heads up into the sky, or necks that lunge eyes, mouths, and ears into the world. When they are penned into the last container, awaiting the draining, what do they do while they are crowded in their starving? They patiently make love. They commit a gentle, hopeless revel. And this is the last poem from this chapbook. An animal unfit for living unmolested. I find the heavens beautiful. I find the earth so too. The seas and the ground, the furling of water and gas, the bright distant points of our isolation. I take comfort in the swinging pendant traffic lights, the slurry of wet raw flour. I am programmed to this language and can only voice my rejection of it in the same language. This is the power of diaspora, the difficulty in finding alternative. Let us send messages to the half-existent. To excuse oneself, to claim not knowing the future is inhuman. I am so worthless that my body serves as brick, conscripted to build up my prison until it is time to lay my own body down for the walls. It is mechanical, snipping into the loop of every lace, separating from every link the cold wrapped bud. At first, the skin is thick and bright, then darkly collapses. Nothing keeps its shape, nothing stands itself upright. We keep sliding apart into smaller and smaller components. And it is in the air above us now. We do not mingle with the outcome of ideas any longer. The energy that knows whether cruelty is disinterested or rightful. They are so happy while we laugh at them, their eyes enthused and shining while we trick them into hurting themselves. Okay, I'm going to move away from the icebergs now and read 4 poems that are relatively recent. I mean, they're my pandemic poems. So, I mean, I'm really excited to see, to read all the books that come out of our experiences this past year and longer. But, you know, my pandemic poems are, as I'm sure, the same with many of you, is writing about my frustration with communication and conversation that is disconnected from physical proximity, and also what it means to, what self-disclosure through the written word, through text actually means. And so these are relatively frustrated poems. You know, not that many of my poems are resolved to anything. So I just kind of made like a slideshow to go along with these poems that just kind of have a video background of, you know, like the inside of my house, my backyard, kind of the only scenery that I've been seeing for the past several months, just to try to give you all, you know, my words, my reading, my text, and also just a little bit more of myself as I read these poems. So I'm going to share screen. I have to minimize a lot of this. Digital fauna. For a girl to scam the world, to slip out the lies from her body, she must open up and risk the penetration of fakes and know herself as a name she didn't choose. Online lover, do you tell God the truth? I don't think we do. I think we have a God-facing self that cannot be entire, even as it loves and receives. He is only real in that part of us. Compartments of related truths are not a unity of truth. My lover doesn't save each part of his heart. He uses it whole over and over again while I crouch over each of my portions. Who is more sincere? Our minds abuzz, but our bodies never completing, just beckoning, the shameful outlet soaked. Writing is my proof, but proofs are only specifically true, and I think the sum of my specifics is a lie. My heart and blood recede, but my electrics seem to be in love, ceaselessly conversing. I don't agree to this hallucination. I like the decadent privacy of text, but a part of it feels mistaken. Others have taught me that many harmful things require privacy. Oh, and my laptop's overheating. Surrounding images say, I'm not how I'm supposed to be. It's only in text that I can belong, even brilliantly. Meanwhile, pollen keeps coating the world, gathering into clumps on the water. The snow never melts in the empire's shade. What am I to do, shaking lily? The network doesn't always register the murder of their kin. Sometimes there is simply an absence among their number at the beginning of the night when it's safer to sleep huddled together. This next one has some rain. I hope it doesn't make you all need to pee. Cut glass goblet. My eyes lose focus on the grid. Are you button, switch, or hinge? Are you a motor or a gear? I ask as one who is a set of rings. Why do I long to look at something that glitters from inconstancy? The sea takes away. It is always taking, sweeping along what it steals as it recedes. I am always unavailable to myself. I was born to my mother, but also chosen for my strength. I know that my will can complete forgetting myself, for remembering her. She has always been the lady. I have always been the house. The weight of unfamiliar arms and chests crumpling the angles of my jaw and shoulders. The familiar strangeness that makes fear redundant, that makes discomfort home. There are always shocking sinews, pearlescent and stiff. I can grow more pure than marrow-filled skeletons. I am shards mistaken for stones. Wild fruit makes itself for seeds, doesn't plump itself with juice for any large animal. And I know this when rodents leave the monstrous tomatoes and oranges half-eaten, sagging like jack-o'-lanterns in the midst of neatened lawns and mulch. In this inland, it was my turn to swallow a dozen little knives and then wait for the pain. At night, the survivors huddle hot and viscous where the air guns embed their pellets. And in the morning, the night's survivors take flight from bowered sick rooms, still leaking, but with ichor. What does the sea mean to me? That I can sink in something never the same? Why, the world will ask, why couldn't this child just quietly outgrow her ongoing abuse? I become myself by drawing myself up for your perusal. To know someone is to be in the middle of their riddle. Don't bring my letters anywhere near me, and I won't carry yours near you. Chlorine. And this one doesn't have a video, so it's going to give my poor laptop a break. The past can't be revised, but can you bear to look back and reinterpret? And then I hasten toward that future eternity of being not me. To us, the giants are a punched hole of light. To them, we are a punched hole of light. In love, we're in permanent compartments. I am traveling through your heart while you travel through mine. I have invited you to your journey. I have invited myself to mine. The spaces inside sea foam, always bound by film that snaps, merges, or splits, but never overlaps. No, it always stays itself. This is why the smallest indivisible parts of me are shaped like little commas, curves that speak to the wrenching involved in differentiation. And. Magnolia, tulle, hibiscus, brocade. The outpouring crowds into you, and when enough has filled you, the consuming and consumed are switched. These words are my delay. Go ahead and build an image of me. They are all false, all possible, the one you love most of all. Light shines into my skin. Did you know that? You were touched by the sun when our bonds were entangled. Now this hung open cleft of needing you. In the belly that dips below sea, a fire encased in iron. I am angry that I was born to speak these scripted sounds. What can I do to deserve different ideas? The spark hops like an irrepressible flea from grid to grid, confiscating solitude. The kept predators we've decided to grow in cages, they're too dangerous for us to release when we can no longer afford to feed them. Put another way, they starve in cages because they would kill us. You tip the uncapped mouth of a bottle in my direction, wielding it like a pointer finger. And this is the last poem that I'll be reading tonight, Intercession. When the heat of the day is being cooked up by the night preceding, I ask what writing has to do with suffering. He asks what writing has to do with creating or understanding. We are both selfish. Why do we crush things down when the universe is flying apart? It must be the dramatic absence left by star death that tricks us. Heartbeats lurch into my head. Thick plates of ice crash. Fish still alive shudder in the crumbles. When I think of extracting my obsession from its utter diffusion in my body, it would be soft as melting wax, thick as milk. To write is to show that I think there is something worthy inside me. We found each other by chance. No, yes. We found each other by chance, though we could only have found each other. I was too much. I was a part of the noise in his head that he wanted to silence. And the noise he made in my head, he wanted that back too. I was using him to tell about myself, to feel alive. My letters are a loop on my heart, a heart that is changeable and self-serving. Perhaps you, reader, are my intercessor. I am offering these words to you, though I know the offering is also an attempt to claim and take for keeping. You can resent this, but I can flex the part of me that was trained by subjection, this routine of convincing you of my beauty ahead of your seeing me in the world. I know that you can only tell if something belongs when it tricks you into looking like it belongs. I can go ahead and give you the still shock, the death bright forest, the starling outside the window that squeals for the chains of a swing set. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ginger. And thank you, Will and Jesse and Jared for telling us how to hear. And really thank you for doing this tonight of all nights, Ginger. Come back in March to hear Francine Harris. Until then, be well and take care. Bye.